Throughout my career in finance, there's a few things that stood out to me about the individuals around me and ultimately why they chose to do finance. We all kind of fell into different character types on why we decided to pursue finance in the first place. Honestly, there's probably 20 different character types that you can really come up with, but to boil it down, could potentially be three. The three types of individuals that I always saw were either solely motivated by prestige and comp. The second bucket would be individuals that were motivated by genuine curiosity in understanding businesses, markets, and they just wanted to learn more. And the third bucket that I would say is it's just a mixture of both. It took me a bit of time to become honest with myself, but I was definitely in the third bucket. And I probably skewed more towards prestige and comp when I really think about it. There's every once in a while where I came across an individual that did want to solely just get into finance because they had a different type of passion for investing and understanding businesses.
I often came across a personality type that was just interested in pushing themselves in any way possible. So what they saw was an opportunity to get into a career that was really, really challenging, and it was a way to prove themselves.
Okay, so in total, that's four buckets that we could simplify this to.
Right. So one of the things I always go through with just about anybody who's thinking about a career in this path is asking, what are your inherent motivations? Assuming that it comes from one of those 4 or 5 different personality types, you just have to understand what it is that you're getting into it for. So assuming that maybe it is comp, and that's perfectly fine, by the way, as long as you're honest about it. What I would normally ask people is to the extreme of like, hey, let me ask you this. If I handed you a toilet brush and I was going to pay you the exact same money, but your job was to go around and clean toilets, would you do it? Now, to a lesser extreme, you could say, well, suppose it's just an accounting job or an FP&A job, internal somewhere. Would you still do that? And that's okay if the answer is yes, but understanding that about yourself is important when you're going in so that you can understand what you want coming out of it. The flip side of that could be, well, suppose that you could learn the same thing, but you were going to make a third of what you would traditionally make as an investment banker. Would you still want to do it? I think that can shed light on what your inherent motivations are as you're considering whether or not this is the career path for you. When I get the question about work-life balance, I often give people a different point of view. I tell people that in your life, what you're probably not really going for is necessarily work-life balance. You're going for work-life harmony. Now, what makes it different? Well, at times, just like a harmony, certain instruments or certain notes are played more loudly or more longly or whatever it is that are going to make the song complete. At certain points in your life, work is going to have to take a dominant position. And other times in your life, there could be other things that you're doing are going to take a more dominant position. But understanding that when you're going into investment banking is important because you have to be able to say that, like, hey, this is something that I'm going to do for a period of time. And yes, work is probably going to be one of, if not the most important thing to me during that time. And I'm willing to put in the time in exchange for a different type of harmonic effect on the other side.
Yeah, I think the takeaway is I wouldn't let work life balance scare you out of it. You will work a lot, but people get too fixated on the fact that they think investment banking would look like a 70, 80, 90 hour career for the long term. Because you can always reassess and leave banking in 2 years, and now you have a great platform to go do a variety of different careers. And so I think oftentimes, especially the people that I was going to school with and working with, oftentimes convince themselves they shouldn't do banking because there might be a lot of hours involved.
So when people are thinking about this as a career, one of the things I ask them to do is work backwards. What type of life do you want to lead? Close your eyes and think about yourself in 5 to 10 years. And all that you're going for is the type of things that you would like to see in your life. Because let's take extreme examples again, because that's what I like to do. Warren Buffett. Most people would consider him to be a pretty successful person, right? But in the same breath, wouldn't you also consider Gandhi or Mother Teresa to be successful? Wildly different pictures of success. But if you can understand about each one of those things, what makes them successful, and ultimately what they wanted to manifest in their own life, you can then take the lens of whether or not this is the right career path for you and what you might want to do with it as a result?
So, to summarize this, the four buckets that we mentioned earlier, most individuals, myself included, would probably fall somewhere, and I think it was the third bucket that we talked about. That bucket being you want to make really good money, and you think banking could be an interesting career for you. I fell into that bucket when I was an undergrad. I didn't really know what it is I wanted to do. So, once you confirm that and you know you fall into that bucket, the best advice that I can give is not what you haven't already heard before, but relentlessly network, continue to make connections. Nowadays, with different LLMs, you can do very broad outreach pretty efficiently. Just get rid of the M dashes. So you could do very broad outreach, but you have to be very consistent with it and consume technical knowledge like no other to really set yourself apart, especially if you're not in one of the top tier schools to get into banking. I wasn't. And so I think where I oftentimes fell short is I would get discouraged after a bunch of no's. And so you need to almost robotically and methodically remove that and just continue reaching out and consuming technical information. And so once you do that, you will most likely get the banking job. Now, after you can reassess on whether or not you want to stay in banking and have a long term career. So, when you're asking, is banking right for me? The answer shouldn't be, do I want to be a 40-year-old, 45-year-old MD? But just, do I want to spend a couple years in banking starting off my career track?
And it's mostly going to be stemming from, do I want to make a lot of money in the short term? Am I interested in how businesses work?